There are loves that arrive like a storm, and we let ourselves be carried by the wind without noticing where we are going. In the beginning, everything feels intense, beautiful, almost like a movie. But at some point, you find yourself confused, and you start to feel a weight you cannot explain. Little by little, something inside you shifts, as if it no longer fits where it once seemed to belong. What few people talk about is that even between women, there are relationships that can hide so well that they only reveal how much they hurt when you are already trapped at the bottom. Maybe this is the moment to start truly listening to yourself. Stay here with me until the end, because this conversation might be the first step toward understanding what your heart has been trying to tell you for a long time. Some toxic lesbian relationships begin with that soulmate feeling, where every message makes your heart race and the desire to always be together feels magical. But over time, that intense connection can turn into a codependent relationship, where simply thinking about being apart for a few hours already brings anxiety and fear of distance. One of the relationship red flags in lesbian couples that often goes unnoticed is when invitations from friends start to require invisible approval. Guilt shows up when you go to a cafe alone, and even something as simple as taking a class can cause arguments. This love that suffocates creates an invisible minefield, where any step outside of us feels like a threat. Anyone who has lived through a toxic LGBTQIA+ relationship knows that the line between deep connection and loss of autonomy is thin. Conversations that once flowed easily turn into exchanges of justifications, and every moment of silence becomes suspicion of disinterest. That is when the feeling of being in an emotional prison appears, and intimacy turns into an obligation rather than a gift. The danger of this codependent relationship is that it feeds on itself. The more you erase yourself, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before. And when the bond feels like the only place of value and safety, it also becomes the biggest thief of your energy. This is only the first step toward other types of emotional abuse that do not always show themselves so clearly. In many toxic lesbian relationships, jealousy arrives disguised as affection. At first, it feels like a protective embrace, I just want you to be okay. But little by little, that care begins to come with invisible rules. She wants to know who you are talking to, why a friend called you so late, or why that person liked your photo. It is as if every step you take is being watched. This is one of the most dangerous relationship red flags because it hides behind the mask of love and care. Possessive jealousy can go far beyond sideways glances at a party. It can turn into control over your social media, monitoring your friendships, and even constant comments about the clothes you wear. Small concessions made to avoid arguments build a controlling relationship that steals your freedom in a way that is almost impossible to notice at first. This constant vigilance creates a tense environment where any outside interaction feels like a threat. Emotional abuse in this form is subtle, but it leaves deep marks on self-esteem. Over time, the person being controlled begins to believe they are wrong for wanting to live freely, and they internalize the idea that they must change to keep the peace. When jealousy turns into possession, it no longer protects, it imprisons. And when you are inside this cycle, it becomes harder to see that what looks like care is actually a way to limit your world. In some toxic LGBTQIA+ relationships, the emotional routine is so unstable that living in it feels like being in a broken amusement park. One day, the love is intense, full of declarations, and the next, a seemingly small argument explodes, followed by long and heavy silences. The cycle of emotional abuse is sneaky. It starts with small tensions, grows into intense fights, and ends with a reconciliation so passionate that it makes you forget everything else. This pattern reinforces the idea that the love that suffocates is also the love that saves, creating a codependent relationship where drama mixes with affection. Those who live in this cycle lose the sense of what normal is. The crises become so frequent that the anxiety of when will the next one happen never goes away. Reconciliation becomes the fuel that keeps the pattern alive until you forget that a healthy relationship can exist without extreme highs and lows. This emotional roller coaster is not romantic adrenaline, it is constant emotional exhaustion. And when stability starts to feel strange or uncomfortable, the door opens for a kind of emotional violence that is even more silent. Emotional abuse in lesbian relationships often appears in small doses. It shows up in comments that seem harmless, a joke about your body during a gathering with friends, or a "you are overreacting" when you try to express how you feel. This kind of gaslighting in a lesbian couple is dangerous because it makes the person question their own perception. In an abusive relationship between women, this devaluation can become so normalized that it goes unnoticed. Subtle criticism about the way you dress, speak, or act slowly erodes your inner sense of security, and with every comment, no matter how small, your confidence weakens. Over time, you start monitoring yourself to avoid new remarks until you completely lose the spontaneity you once had. When you believe you are always wrong or overreacting, it becomes easier to accept limits that once seemed absurd. This process is slow but effective for the one in control. Even without shouting or explicit insults, the impact of this emotional abuse is as deep as any direct aggression. And with every subtle criticism, there also comes a moment of affection or validation, creating a confusing mix that keeps the bond alive. It is in this environment that isolation and loss of identity find the perfect space to take root. Isolation rarely begins with an explicit order to stay away from people. It comes disguised as a need for exclusivity, "it is just us against the world" that feels romantic at first. Little by little, meetings with friends become less frequent, conversations with family grow shorter, and hobbies that once brought joy are left behind. This kind of isolation in a lesbian relationship is one of the most serious red flags because it cuts off the support systems that could help you see what is happening. The loss of identity happens almost imperceptibly. Your opinions, habits, and even the way you dress start to be shaped to please your partner. It is as if your life revolves entirely around her wants and needs, and any attempt to reconnect with yourself is met with criticism or accusations of selfishness. This internal disconnection is fueled by the fear of losing the relationship. The loneliness outside the couple feels bigger than any discomfort inside it, and emotional abuse hides under the mask of love. Over time, you can no longer say what you like, what you want, or even who you are because everything has been dissolved into the dynamics of the relationship. Breaking this cycle is not just about leaving a relationship. It is about returning to belonging to yourself. And that reunion with yourself is where everything begins to change. The path to recognizing what nourishes you and what hurts you in a relationship is not always obvious, and sometimes it takes time before we can see it clearly. It is in this reconnection that you reclaim parts of yourself that once felt lost, and you begin to feel your life, your energy, and your love returning to the right place, which is within you. There are relationships that heal, and there are relationships that consume. You do not have to get used to what hurts nor accept less than you deserve. There is a kind of love that is light, safe, and full of peace, and it is as possible as it is necessary. If what we talked about here touched something inside you, share this video with another woman who might be needing to feel understood right now. And tell me in the comments which part stayed echoing in your heart after this conversation. Your words might be exactly the embrace that someone else needs to find courage.